In your bulletin, there is the orange outline that we're going to be following. This is the expanded outline. If you want the abbreviated version, it's on the back of your bulletin. So everybody wants to be a good parent and have a morally strong family. The challenge is accomplishing that in a fast-paced world with a lot of pressure and a lot of distractions. And although it's a challenge, it can be done. Anything can be done. In Proverbs 24:3 it says, it takes wisdom to have a good family, and it takes understanding to make it strong. Nothing in life prepares you to be a parent. Most of it you just have to learn while you're doing it. In fact, a lot of parenting is just on-the-job training. However, over the years, we have learned that there are some things you want to avoid as a parent. So we're going to look at some pictures of not so good parenting skills. The first one apparently is a child drinking out of the doggy bowl. Maybe that's acceptable at your house. The second one is a baby washing a python. Maybe that's more of a problem in Thailand than it is in Alabama. But if you have a pet snake, maybe your baby will be washing it. You might want to be close and be careful with that. In this next one, apparently the person decided that washing the dishes and the baby at the same time maybe saves time. I don't know. Maybe it saves a little money on the gas for the heated water, but the baby's getting washed along with the dishes. This next one, apparently the baby is getting a tattoo. Yeah, you might want to be old enough, let your child get old enough to make a decision on the tattoo thing. This next one, what's interesting is that the baby has fallen out of the stroller, but notice the mother, she's not breaking the connection on her phone. She's going to continue to talk on the cell phone even though the baby is on the sidewalk. Yeah, no matter what happens, you can't end the call. You've got to keep that call going. Okay, on this next one, I don't know how detailed you can see it. The entire family of 8 people is on the motorcycle. There's 8 people on the motorcycle.
That's true in India.
Yes.
It is really true.
It is. I don't think it's here in Mobile. Okay, on this next one, I don't know if she knows that she's crushing her child. You might want to... it's a little tight back there. That's for sure. I guess you're supposed to have your child restrained while in the car, so here's the child in the seatbelt. Okay. On this one, they're pulling the baby stroller on the motorcycle. And I guess that saves, having to push it down the sidewalk. Now, I saved this last one because it is my favorite. They apparently are lowering their child down the wall to feed the animal in the zoo. Yeah, I think they have the child, they're holding the child by the feet, and it's hanging down, feeding the animal. Okay, maybe that's not the greatest parenting, but anyway, you get the idea. So one parent made a statement like this: I don't want to force religion on my children. I'm going to let them find their own pathway. That is the most foolish statement I have ever heard.
Amen.
Because children have to be guided and directed to learn anything in life. And if you just let them go on their own, most of the stuff they're going to pick up is going to be things like aren't so good. Now, from an eternal perspective, giving your children the knowledge of God and moral goodness is the most important thing that you can do, because it is the only thing that is going to last forever. So as a parent, you want to give your children a spiritual foundation for 3 reasons. Number 1, building a spiritual foundation is the responsibility of parents. It is not the responsibility of the government. It is not the responsibility of your child's daycare or your child's school. It's not even the responsibility of the church. This church is here to supplement you and not supplant your role as a parent. So in Ephesians 6:4 it says this: Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So I'm reading this in the New International Version, and I come across the word exasperate. I don't know exactly what that means. It did not sound good. But it's what happens to your children when you set a standard so high that there is no way that they can ever meet it or ever please you. That's exasperating your children. So here's some advice. Know when to cut your kids a little slack. You can't treat them as adults and hold them to a standard that you can't keep yourself. If you do that, you're going to exasperate or anger or frustrate your children. Don't drive your children away with irresponsible, irrational, or unreachable goals. Don't exasperate your children. But instead, it said, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Did you know that this is not an option? That this is not A, B, C, D, none of the above, all of the above? Not an option. It's mandatory. And it doesn't matter how old your children are, whether they're 5 months or 50 years, it's never too late to start with godly instructions. Now, how you do it is going to be dependent on their age and their temperament. Obviously, you have more control probably over a 6-year-old than a 36-year-old, but they are your children no matter what age. So as a parent, it is your responsibility to bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Try to avoid exasperating your children. And then number 2, second thing, is building a spiritual foundation is the key to God's spiritual blessings. If we want God's spiritual blessings in our lives and in the lives of our children, it begins when we establish or build a spiritual foundation. So there's this passage in the Old Testament in the book of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6. It says this: My people are being destroyed because they don't know me. Since you have forgotten the laws of your God, I will forget to bless your children. Now I understand that this statement is being made under a little different covenant and agreement. But the principle of the passage scares me nonetheless. God is speaking to the nation of Israel, and He says, I want you to know that there is the possibility that I will withhold blessings from your children. Why? Because you don't know me. Families fall apart morally because they don't know the Lord. Society falls apart morally because it doesn't know the Lord. Marriages sometimes fall apart because the Lord isn't included. My people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. So building a spiritual foundation in your children's lives is the most important thing you can do for the spiritual blessings to flow. Now, number 3 is building a spiritual foundation is the secret to multi-generational blessings. Now, what does that mean? That sounds like kind of a big phrase, multi-generational blessings. It means this. You can do things now that will spiritually bless your children and your grandchildren. It's true. Take a look at Psalm 78. It says this. God commanded our forefathers, we're going to call them the first generation, to teach their children, second generation, so the next generation would know them. Even children yet to be born, we'll call that the third generation, and they in turn would tell their children, the fourth generation. This is an amazing principle. You can actually influence people who are not yet alive by what you teach and what you do. Not only can you bless your life and your family, but you can bless your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren because of your godly life. In fact, some of you are the recipient of generations of godly religious ancestors. Some of you had parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, maybe even great-great-grandparents who were religious, and so serving the Lord to you is as easy and as natural as breathing because you have a long family history. Now, if your parents weren't believers, you can begin the chain right now and say, from this day forward, my family is going to be a godly family, and I want my children and grandchildren to be blessed because I walk with the Lord. That's what the Bible calls leaving a spiritual legacy. And from an eternal viewpoint, it is more important than hobbies. It's even more important than financial success. From an eternal viewpoint. Now, God made 4 statements to parents in the Old Testament, and what's so amazing is that they're all in one verse. Does it amaze you how the Bible says so much with so few words? You know, just regular, ordinary, uninspired people writing this, it would take several pages, and then they still wouldn't say what God can say in one verse. Just comes down to one verse. Parenting principles in one verse. It says this, Deuteronomy 6, verse 7. You must teach these commandments to your children and talk about them when you are at home or out for a walk, at bedtime, and the first thing in the morning. 4 statements. And I underlined each of them. Statement number 1 is you. You. The church is not here to replace you, but to help you. The responsibility is yours. So here's a quote from a lady, Lisa. Your children are the greatest gift God will give you, and their souls the heaviest responsibility He will place in your hands. Now, in my notes, I numbered what she said. 1, take time with them. 2, teach them to have faith in God. 3, be a person in whom they can have faith. You know what that means? Being an example. When you are old. Oh, yes, and it will happen. Tragically, it will happen. When you are old, nothing else you've done will have mattered as much. You. Statement number 2. Must. You have a moral obligation as a Christian and as a parent to instruct your children in the ways of the Lord. It is something you are morally obligated as a believer to do. Third statement. You must teach. Teach. Where are you going to teach them? How about this? Isn't it interesting how the Bible covers everything? At home, out for a walk, at bedtime, first thing in the morning, or around the clock. As a parent, you are always teaching your children. Now here's a question, and it's kind of rhetorical, and we'll probably generally agree. Do you believe that the world is getting safer or more unsafe for your children? Now I know that every generation since the beginning of time has said that their generation is more safe than the previous generation. In fact, a few months ago I read you some quotes. One was from 1855. It was in the Scientific American publication, and it said, parents who allow their children to learn the game of chess are promoting laziness and are no good parents, lousy parents. So I know that it's a generational thing. But let me tell you why I believe the world is more dangerous for children today than in the past. There are more ways for wackos and weirdos to get to your children than ever before, and it is called the internet, and it comes into your child's bedroom. Now, what may seem impossible for you isn't impossible for God, because all things are possible with God. Here's a quote from somebody born way back in 1932. Well, I'm sorry if you were born around that time. I didn't mean that. Never mind. Let me start over. Here's a quote from a guy born in 1932. I believe that what we become depends on what our fathers teach us at odd moments when they aren't trying to teach us. We are formed, I love this, we are formed by little scraps of wisdom. You know, it's not like your parents said, okay, it's 2 p.m., everybody line up for 45 minutes of instruction. It's not how it works. It's those little things that not only are they taught, but they're just what we sometimes say, not just taught, but caught. It's you're teaching them all the time. And then statement number 4. You must teach them these commandments. I love this. I love these commandments. It doesn't say teach them these suggestions. It doesn't say teach them these observations. It doesn't say teach them these possibilities. Teach them these commandments. It's okay for us to say God has commandments. And there are some things that God says are definitely right, and there are some things that God says that are definitely wrong. There is objective and moral goodness and evil in the world as defined by God. Now, the reason why I'm emphasizing these commandments is because you and I are living in a time when the Bible is a joke. It is a joke, folks, from a cultural standpoint. We are living in a time where if you believe in 6 24-hour days of creation, it is a joke. And I was talking to a Christian, to a believer the other day who said, well, maybe evolution. We are living in a time when believing one man and one woman is the only combination for marriage is a joke. We are living in a time when commitment is a joke. I'm talking culturally. I just read an article that said since 2000, that hasn't been that long ago. What was the year 2000? What was that, 2-3 years ago? Okay, 18 years ago. Marriage has fallen 13%. Now, I don't know if you want me to tell you what the rest of the article said. It said for a lot of guys, their wife has become porn. Porn is the new wife. And guys just aren't going to commit to a relationship when they can get what they want sexually anytime they want it on the internet. That's what it said. We are living in a time when all of morality is subjective and it's based on how you feel. Well, how do you feel about that? So it says, teach them these commandments. These commandments. I have 4 goals for the parents based on today's message. Number 1, I want to encourage you as a parent, not discourage you. If I said anything discouraging, I apologize. I did speak a little bit of reality, but I wasn't trying to be discouraging. I want to encourage you. It says this in 1 Corinthians 15:58. Certainly it has an application to parenting. So my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and steady, always enthusiastic about the Lord's work, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. What you're doing is not useless. Number 2, remind you that great parenting isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. It has nothing to do with being perfect. It just has to do with you being there in your child's life. In fact, the only thing your kids are going to remember, I know you would like them to remember the trip to Disney and the cruise in the Atlantic Ocean. Only thing they're going to remember is this, whether or not you were any fun. 3. That's all they remember. Only thing they remember. Help you understand that parenting is about moving your children from parent control when they're babies to self-control when they're children, to God's control when they're old enough to comprehend the differences between right and wrong. And 4, ask you to have your children participate in our various classes and ministries. It's never too early to teach your children. We want your children to be a part of this congregation. I'd like for us to read Lamentations 3:24 together aloud. Are you ready? I'll do a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Deep in my heart I say, the Lord is all I need. I can depend on Him. Very beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I have something else to share with you. You may have thought that the message was over,
But did you see these outlines up here? If I could have some folks come up and pass these out. This is so fabulous. I think I need to keep one for myself. I love it when you all volunteer like this. It's great. In your bulletin, you have an insert entitled Port City Community Outreach Team. This was introduced to you last Sunday. And so I put it in the bulletin again so that as I talk about what is on this blue sheet, if you want more information about what the Port City Community Outreach Team is about, you can read the sheet in your bulletin. We're going to be meeting after services on January the 28th for a few minutes. But on this blue sheet, your written personal testimony about Port City. Thank you for agreeing to share a short personal testimony about Port City and how your church has made a difference in your life. This is an optional ministry. You'll be given several choices at the end of the outline. Here's a disclosure. Your personal statement may be included as a part of our public packet being sent out to more than 7,000 homes near our church campus. Personal testimonies are an indispensable part of any church's outreach program. In many ways, God is able to use testimonies more effectively than sermons in challenging people to think seriously about their relationship to God. How do they sell cars on TV, folks? The personal testimony. You remember that one about Toyota where the guy's jumping up like this? So happy about the new car. It's the personal testimony. Our congregation will grow if you're willing to share how Port City has made a difference in your life. Sharing your testimony is not showing off. It's an act of mature spiritual leadership if shared in the spirit of humility. The Bible has examples of people sharing their testimony about God and Jesus. David said this in Psalm 66, "All of you who fear God, come near and listen, and I'll tell you what He has done for me." The woman at the well. Many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus because the woman had said, "He told me everything I ever did." Well, I was going to say something about the woman at the well, but we'll let that go for another occasion. The man born blind. You remember the man born blind? And the religious leaders started to get on to him. And, yeah, well, who did this? And was this person even, is this person legitimate? Do you know if this person knows anything? And a guy says, "Hey, I don't know whether he's good or bad." The man replied, "But I know this, I was blind, but now I see. All I know is I see, man." Boy, that's a personal testimony, isn't it? Peter and John, they were told to shut up. And they said, "We cannot stop telling about the wonderful things we have seen and heard." Paul, well, too many for Paul. On 6 different occasions, Paul used his personal testimony to share God's word with non-believers in Acts 22 through 26. Jesus said this in the Message paraphrase, John 3:11. Listen carefully. "I'm speaking sober truth to you. I speak only of what I know by experience. I give witness only to what I have seen with my own eyes. There is nothing secondhand here, no hearsay. Yet instead of facing the evidence and accepting it, you procrastinate with questions." We are told to share our personal testimony. Psalm 105, "Give thanks to the Lord and pray to Him. Tell the nations what He has done." Acts 20:24, "I don't care about my own life. The most important thing is that I complete my mission, the work the Lord Jesus gave me, to tell people the good news about God's grace." So, we would like for you, if you choose, to share a written testimony about how Port City has made a difference in your life, so we can include it, selected ones, it may or may not be included, in our pack. I like to have a front page and a back page with nothing but personal testimonies from members of this congregation. So here's some guidelines. Keep your testimony to a few sentences. 2, express your love for the Lord and all He's done for you. Maybe you can mention a specific way the Lord has blessed you at Port City. 3, express love for your church. Emphasize how we are a family. 4, it's okay to express thoughts about any fears or doubts you've struggled with financially, relationally, spiritually, physically. Maybe you're going through a health issue. Maybe you're dealing with a divorce and you're struggling right now. Has the church helped you? Has the Lord helped you in some way, encouraged you? 5, let people know your decision to serve the Lord was a genuine step of faith, not a snap decision. 6, share a promise you're claiming from God that has come true. 7, encourage others to give serious consideration as to what God would have them do. The only way some people in our community will learn about the Lord is through specific examples of Port City members willing to share a positive testimony. Your personal statement will have tremendous influence on other people and will make a difference for eternity. And I just have a few examples from some I've received in the past. Here's some examples of personal testimony. Port City has challenged me to step out in faith and trust the Lord in all things. It's great to see my family grow in their commitment to the Lord. I am thankful for Port City. I've only been a member for a short time, but feel it's home for me. I've learned the importance of putting God's work first in my life. Love means being willing to give of your time and financial sacrificially. I'm trying to stretch my faith and trust our Lord who will always provide. He's taught me to always know He will never give me more than I can handle. To think beyond my family troubles, finances, and work. To reevaluate what's important for happiness and growth beyond my daily restrictions and boundaries. The Lord has brought me back. I had removed myself after a divorce. I was angry. I know it wasn't God's fault. I know how much I need Him in my life. I now have Him as my number one priority and will be more involved in the church. I'm so glad I have Port City in my life. To utterly trust God and be peaceful and joyful about my faith. I love the joy He fills my heart with, especially where so much around us is wrong, crime, sickness, drugs. The list goes on, but my heart bursts with joy, the joy of knowing who I am, God's. Now, the deadline for the submission of your testimony is February the 11th, and you can, on your personal testimony, you have a box, a couple of boxes, you can check one box, you have some options. May be used without your name, may be used with your full name, your first and last name, or may be used with my first name only. And then, on page 4, your personal testimony or statement can be mailed to the church. There's the church's address. Your personal testimony, you can directly write it into an email. You don't even need to use this form. If you just want to write it in an email and send it to me, you can do that. If you want to type it out and then you want to scan it in a PDF and email it to me, there is my email. And then at the bottom, if you want to use this form, you can use it. So, in the packet that we're putting together to send out to the houses around the neighborhood, we're going to have a booklet that talks about important core values we believe in. It's going to have a personal letter from me. We're going to give people the option of having an in-home or at the church or some other location they choose Bible study. And then we're going to have a front page and a back page with these personal testimonies on how the Lord has made a difference in your life. And personal testimonies, nothing more powerful than a personal testimony. You can argue a person's theology, but it's kind of difficult to argue what a person has personally experienced. So, if you would like to participate in that, that'll be great. Again, if you want to know more about this Port City Outreach Ministry, it's the insert in the bulletin, and we're going to be meeting after services January the 28th. David is going to come up to the front and lead us in an invitation hymn. If you have a particular need, please let us know what it is while we stand and sing.